Good afternoon, everyone out there in the virtual world. Well, thank you for joining a Tattered Cover virtual event. My name is Adam. I'm the director of events here. And so it means a lot for you to spend your Saturday morning or evening, if you're like our author, with us. If you're interested in more virtual events, we're still doing them. We're still keeping safe. Tattercover.com/event is where you can find all of your virtual event needs. If you're in the Denver area where we're located, please come. We are doing some in-person events. We're keeping it safe and masks are required, and we would love to see you. But again, if you're in the virtual world, check out tatteredcover.com/event. Today, we have an amazing conversation between two terrific writers to celebrate Owen Colfer's newest book, The Fowl Twins Get What They Deserve. Owen will be in conversation with Mackenzie Lee. We're going to read their bios, and then I'll turn it over to them. Owen is an author of the New York Times bestselling Artemis Fowl series, which was adapted into a major motion picture from Disney and the 3-book spin-off series about the Fowl twins. He also wrote the critically acclaimed Warp trilogy and many other titles for young readers and adults, including Hellfire, Iron Man the Gauntlet, Airman, Half Moon, Investigations, and Owen Colfer's Legend of Books, the Wish List, Benny and Omar, and Benny and the Babe. In 2014, he was named Ireland's laureate for children's literature. He lives with his wife and 2 sons in Dublin. To learn more, please visit owencolfer.com. He's also on Twitter at Owen Colfer. Mackenzie Lee holds a BA in history and an MFA from Simmons College in writing for children and young adults. Her short fiction and nonfiction has appeared in Atlas Obscura, the Boston Globe, and the Newport Review, among others. Her debut novel, This Monstrous Thing, won the Penn New England Susan P. Bloom Children's Book Discovery Award. Her second book, The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue, was a New York Times bestseller and an ABA bestseller, which earned 5-star reviews and was a #1 Indie Next Pick and received the 2018 Stonewall Award honor and a New England Book Award. She loves Diet Coke, sweater weather, and Star Wars. Who doesn't? On a perfect day, she can be found enjoying all 3. She currently calls Boston home, where she works as an independent bookstore manager and pets every dog she meets. Please visit her at mackenzielee.com. Please welcome Owen and Mackenzie, who will now take over and have an amazing conversation. You all are in for a treat. Owen and Mackenzie, welcome.
Oh, I stopped my video.
Oh, you are back.
Hello.
Here.
Can I start with a question? As a non-American, what is the big attraction of Star Wars? Like, what is better about Star Wars than any other like movie series? Because it seems to have an almost religious experience in the States. I remember, and this is gonna cause arguments, Mackenzie. I remember going to see one of the Star Wars movies, in like the trilogy that never happened, in the States. I was on tour somewhere, and in one of them, Yoda is fighting, I think it's Count Dooku or something.
Darth Sidious, Emperor Palpatine, sure.
And I was laughing because to me, this was Kermit fighting Dracula. And I thought this was very, very funny. And people got actually quite angry. So there's no room for laughing.
I mean, that's not what it is. It is Kermit fighting Count Dracula, but that's part of why I think that's, for me anyway, is the absurdity of it is part of what's fun. I think myself included, a lot of us have a lot of nostalgia tied into it. And so I was not alive when the original trilogy came out, but that was sort of the first like epic multi-medium story that I was ever exposed to. And so that was sort of my entry into genre when I was like 5 years old and watched Return of the Jedi at my friend's house and was just like captivated by the otherworldliness of it. So I think for me, it was like my first exposure to grown-up storytelling and to genre fiction in a lot of ways. Though I will say I did come of age in a really perfect time when the prequel trilogy came out. I was young enough that I didn't realize they were terrible, but I was old enough that I was just like so excited for more Star Wars that I still have such a soft spot for those prequel movies, even though I watched them and I'm like, objectively, these are terrible films that were misguided and directionless and only really existed to show off CGI. However, I was at ALA a couple of years ago, and back when we could all actually gather together, and I was at a dinner of librarians, and they had a couple of authors there, as they do, and we were all saying like they were having us do different little icebreakers or fun facts. And one of the questions for the authors was, what's a movie that you love that everybody else hates? And I said the Star Wars prequels, and I got booed by a room full of librarians.
Oh, that's hard to do. That is
I know,
hard to
the
do.
nicest people on earth. It was
so nice.
It was a devastating blow. But I mean, for me, I think the Star Wars really is that sort of nostalgia for me. And for me, it's a not to get too cheesy, but it's like a little bit of a homecoming. It's an origin story. What's the equivalent of that in England? Do you have something that was your?
Oh, well, for me, I really love the original Planet of the Apes movies. I thought they were fantastic, and not just the first one with Charlton Heston, but the other 4 or 5. So for me, I mean, the effects weren't probably up to the same standard, but it's just that there were no really good until Star Wars came. The big thing about Star Wars for me was you could accept, like, the effects looked perfect for the time. You were, a lot of the movies you watched, it was like plasticine men being slowly moved across the screen, and you just had to celebrate. Okay, we know this is terrible, but we're just going to accept it and not be drawn out of the movie. But with Star Wars, you didn't have to do that. It just looked amazing, and if you saw it in the movie theater,
even still, I'm still amazed by the original trilogy films. I saw an exhibit a couple of years ago, I think in Sydney, of a bunch of the props and the models and stuff from the original Star Wars films, and I still, like, I look at those and I cannot wrap my brain around the fact that, like, that's what's in the movie. When you're seeing the the walkers in the movie in the snow planet, it's they're this tall. It's insane to me. It's so cool.
I was on tour when I was in, I suppose it was San Francisco, and 2 guys from Skywalker Ranch came to my event, and they brought us out there the next day to the ranch for a tour, and I just had to swallow all my snarky Star Wars remarks and just accept that I'm there and enjoy it. And it was absolutely incredible. If you ever I'm sure if you let it be known you wanted to go there, if you do want to go there, it is really worth seeing. The stuff they're doing is unbelievable. They're so far ahead, I think, of what everybody else is doing. So
since we're Disney authors and this is a Disney event, I would like to formally say, put it out there to the world. If anyone would like to take me to Skywalker Ranch for any reason,
there's
babysitting there that needs to get done. I'm happy to do that.
I mean, I think my happiest moment was getting my photo beside the life-size Boba Fett. So that was I do remember going to the you've probably been to the Marvel building, if you're, I don't know, in New York, and they have all this Tony Stark's or all the Iron Men's lined up, the life-size suits of the Iron Man.
I have been to a Marvel building. I've not been to that Marvel building, and
they were saying, would you like to get your photo taken with the Iron Man? I said, just give me my check. I'm a grown man. I don't need to get my photo. I want to sign a contract. Get out of here. So it's funny, but no, I'm kidding. I didn't say that at all. I said, yes, please.
I was gonna say that was wasted on you. That would have been like a litmus test, where if you said no, they would have been like, it's like Charlie in the Chocolate Factory. They're like, you're not pure of heart enough.
I'm going down the chute. Yeah. So
goodness gracious.
Here's an interesting fact for you.
Yeah, go for it.
This is a book I would love to write someday. That there was, you don't remember the Planet of the Apes TV show. No. So it was kind of they still had Riley McDowell, but that was like the only thing. But there was a Planet of the Apes circus that went around the UK, and I presume it went around America, where they played out all the chases between the apes and the humans and the horseback riding and all that sort of thing. It sounds absolutely amazing. And a friend of mine actually saw it when he was a little kid. And I'm just so jealous of him, because I'm sure like there was loads of people killed.
I was going to say, that sounds, as magical as it sounds, my brain immediately goes to like animal cruelty and ocean
health and safety, and all these guys wearing rubber helmets or probably asbestos face masks. It's probably terrible, but it's a great story. It's a great romance story to meet someone at the Circus of the Apes, who I think would be great. Maybe that's
Oh,
just me.
that sounds like a Doctor Who episode that then very quickly becomes like a Black Mirror episode that
Yeah,
you meet someone at the Circus of the Apes.
I'm
Ooh.
definitely going to do that. If anyone, I'm just like dropping hints now and see if my editor pops on and says, yes, do it. We'll publish that. I don't know. It's a
This
bit weird.
entire event is just you and I hinting at the IP that we would like to write
Yeah.
in the future with Disney.
Highlander, I would also like. I'd like Highlander too. That's another one of those movies that was when you look at it, you have to pretend you can't see the ropes holding the guys up in the air because they cover them with lightning to hide them, and you just have to go. But it's just such the storytelling is so good.
So I have not seen Highlander. I have unfortunately seen Highlander 2.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's that's kind of ruins it for you.
But yeah, that's a nonsense movie.
The first one is also nonsense, but it somehow manages because it has the best bad guy in the world, Clancy Brown, playing the Kurgan. And of course Sean Connery's in there, but they go crazy because Sean Connery plays an Egyptian, and Christopher Lambert plays a Scottish man, and neither of them really try and do accents. But it's just so wacky that you've got to. Well, I enjoyed it. I've watched it about 20 times, but I would love to do a Highlander novel if anyone's listening.
Just
So
putting it out in case any Highlanders are listening, just putting it out in the universe. And your schedule's free now because the Fowl twins are the series is done.
Yeah, I wanted to go out with a massive explosion of adventure and laughter and family bonding, I suppose. So the Fowl twins get what they deserve. It's kind of an ambiguous title where they might deserve something good, or they might deserve something really bad, and possibly they deserve both, and they get a little bit of both. So it's a bittersweet ending, but also I think it should satisfy any Fowl readers that are still out there. And so I'm sad leaving it. I remember when I finished the last series, the Artemis Fowl series, I went on tour because it was the last one. There was a huge amount of interest in the last book. So I went on tour for about a year, and everywhere I went, people tried to talk me out of finishing it. And at one point I kind of thought, you know what, maybe they're right and I should go back and do another one. But you know yourself, and I'm sure you've finished up stuff as well. When it's time to end it, if you don't end it, you're not doing yourself any favors, or the readers. It would be like a cash grab or something. So it's time for the twins. It's actually time for the family to go and live on a farm in the country, as I think the euphemism is. So I'm just letting them
euthanizing all of them.
Yeah. So they're all gonna live together. But I think this is a nice, solid entry in the series. That it's a good way to finish it off. And we were just talking about this. We're both kind of in a situation where we've just finished something. We're in that in between land where you don't know what you're doing next, and I find that really tough to get through. I mean, at the moment, I kind of panic, even though it happens to me every single time. I'm kind of, oh my God, nothing's gonna come.
Especially when you have something, for me anyway, when I have this series you've been doing the Fowls for 20 years. I've been doing this one for about 5, the one I just finished up, and it almost feels like I've forgotten how to start because I've been building and building and building on an existing foundation for so long that you forget how to go all the way back to the start, and you kind of forget how, for me anyway, I get panicked that I'm going to forget where do ideas come from? How do I start a story? How do I make things interesting without having an existing interesting base that people are invested in?
And do you find, having done the masters in writing for children, that you understand how to build a story in a technical way, or did that help you? I mean, doing that, studying like that?
I mean, it teaches you how to. Just like learning any kind of story structure, like you learn how to do it and you go, great, now I'm never going to make mistakes again. I understand all these like plot mechanisms. I'm going to use them. I'm going to be smart. And then as soon as you actually start writing or you start plotting, you just fling it all out the window. And then 2 drafts down the line, you're like, why isn't any of this working? And you're like, oh, it's maybe because I'm messing with the story structure. It helped, but it also, part of it is just like teaching you how to do things so then you can do them incorrectly and be hyper aware the whole time of how incorrectly you're doing it and how you're probably shooting yourself in the foot, but you're doing it anyway. So I think the MFA was tremendously helpful for me, but it also just made me more aware of my ineptitudes in many ways.
Yeah, and let me tell you, that doesn't really change. I'm I don't know 30 years ahead of you, and it's not getting. I often think I reached a sweet spot back in my late 30s, and that was when I was firing on all cylinders, and I should have just kept that formula going. But at the same time, I would hope that the writing is better, just the actual prose is better for whatever kind of book I'm writing. But it's strange. It's a strange career we have, when we're just people trust us to do stuff. I mean, that's not a good thing. But
one of the things that I constantly struggle with about novel writing, and I guess any kind of art, is that as soon as you put something out in the world, it's no longer the best thing you can do, because you learn things along the way, and you practice and you get better, and then the work you're putting out that people are reading immediately and talking about is not your best work anymore, because you've learned things. And so every time I have someone come to me and say like, oh, I loved this thing about your book, I just want to argue back to them, be like, no, I'm so much better now, I'm so much smarter now, I can do it better, let me explain to you why this. And like, you have to kind of fight that urge to apologize almost for not being as good as once as you are now. It's a very strange.
And the thing you have out is not even the best version of that thing.
Exactly.
I've found myself in readings editing on the fly as I'm reading out my own words. I'm like editing as I go.
That is tremendously comforting to hear you say, because I've found I worry that I'm just going to spend the rest of my life rewriting the books that I've already published in my head. And it's tremendously stressful to live in the past that way. And it's sort of an impediment to progress, but okay.
It is, but also I think it's important to have that critical faculty, because if you lose it and you kind of think, well, I'm there now, I'm formed, I think that's the kiss of death. That's when things start to really go wrong.
How have you managed that with the Fowl twins and with Artemis Fowl, a series that you've been working on, that you started not to keep driving this home, but 20 years ago, and you're still working on, like, do you find there are things that you wish you'd done differently? Do you want to retcon things? Do you kind of go back, and these seem like the kind of books that could lend themselves to some rewriting of past events if necessary, but how have you worked in this world for so long and kept up the energy and the consistency and continuity?
I think there are some things I would change, and if I could go back and rewrite them, I think what's really helped is that I've alternated between. I only once did 2 Artemis books in a row. Usually there was either a novel or 2 or 3 picture books, or I did a play in Ireland or something like that. So it was only 2 in a row, and in that way, whenever I came back to them, I was really ready to go back. And then when I finished the Artemis Fowl series, I had a plan that I was going to see how it went. And I'm not, like, my great hero is like Bowie, and he's behind me there somewhere. But I read a book about him, and he was saying that when he was just sick of all of his old stuff, he was just so sick of it, he didn't want to play it. He didn't want to look at it. And I kind of felt like that, I was just, I don't want to do any more Artemis Fowl books. But then he kind of hit 50, and he just said, you know what, that's my stuff. I really like that stuff. And he went out and did this big world tour of the hits. And I remember seeing that tour. It came to Ireland, and it seemed that everyone around him said he was really happy for about 3 years being in the worlds that he'd created and seeing how much they meant to people. And in a tiny, tiny infinitesimal way, that's kind of what happened to me. Like, of course, I'm not comparing anything to Bowie at all, but just that feeling of, from not wanting anything to do with the Fowl world to kind of saying, you know what, that's my world. I mean, that people still love that world, and maybe I could dip back into it for 2 or 3 years. And that's what I've done, and I really enjoyed it. And I think I learned a lot in the meantime. So these books are more arch, they're more gothic, They're more scatological. And they were more enjoyable to write, I suppose, and I really enjoyed that. But there was a period there where I just felt, what are you doing? You've done 20 years on Leprechauns. It's time to do something else. And so I went off and I did something else. But then I came back around to actually, those were the happiest years of my life. I was in my 30s and 40s. I had a young family. We had a nice house. We traveled around the world. It was really fantastic. And why am I being so not anti it, I suppose, but I was feeling quite tepid towards it. But I got over myself, as we say in Ireland. I got over myself, and now I'm just very thankful to have had that career or that section of my career, and this like extra bonus section at the end.
Well, as someone who read the Artemis Fowl books when I was, I think 12 or ish something. I read them when I was a kid, not to date both of us, but I read them when they were originally coming out. And then to come back to the Fowl twins, even as an adult, just like I did the audiobooks for them because I do the audiobooks for most things. And as soon as that audio started on anyone, it just felt like coming back to,
oh, nice.
It felt like coming back to just like the tone of them is so specific. And you say these are a little Archer and Gothic, but the tone is so specifically like it's this sort of science-based magic-based science, and the meta-ness of them and the silliness, the underlying silliness, while also taking themselves so seriously. I was sort of transported back to when I first read Artemis Fowl as a kid, and one of the things I remember loving about them was as a young reader, it felt like these books are taking me seriously. These books are taking kids seriously because you have Artemis as this like 12-year-old supervillain smarter than everyone else around him. But I remember you and Lemony Snicket as the series of unfortunate events were like the two for me that I was like, these are books for me that are taking me seriously as a reader and that are taking kids seriously. And it was so much fun to just kind of sink back into that feeling again and get transported back and have this lovely experience of both nostalgia, but also enjoying Miles and Beckett for who they are separate from Artemis. So you definitely have Fowl fans out here that have enjoyed coming back to this world, myself included.
I'm so glad, and it means a lot to me, and because you do when you're so separate, and like you have a huge. You've some legions of fans, but we don't see them all the time. We don't meet them all the time, and I haven't seen them in 2 years really. So you do. I find it hard to get my head around that there's someone in another house reading something that I wrote. Why would they do that? And I'm not trying to have any false modesty here. I'm surprised anytime I go anywhere and people show up, but you do really affect people. And so I don't want to be like one of those pop stars who's like, oh, I'm so rich, but I'm so bored. And it's not like that at all. It's just when you spend 20 years in an office doing the same characters, just as a writer, you need to expand your repertoire and just recharge your batteries, and that's what I did. But I'm so glad, and you're so kind to say those things about the twins, because I wanted to keep that tone, that tone, and I'm very conscious of treating my readers seriously, and I don't really think of them as kids. I just think people will be reading this book, and that's how I think. And because I was a teacher for so long, I was a teacher for 15 years of the 10 to 12 age group, and I realized a lot of the times those kids were a lot smarter than me, and they just didn't realize that yet, thank goodness, because if they realized that, the class would fall apart. But a lot of kids are much smarter than the adults looking after them, and all I did was kind of amplify that with Artemis and give him an outlet for his brains. But I asked, when I was traveling, I traveled around, I would ask kids, what is it? Why do you like Artemis Fowl? And I didn't get the answer I expected. The answer that rose to the top time after time was, we like him because he's in control. He's in charge. He tells the teachers what to do. He's the one with the plans. He doesn't wait in the car while the grown-ups are doing stuff. He's the one doing the stuff. And that I found that very interesting, that's what they were drawn to, because I would thought they would say the plots or the jokes or whatever, but it's that feeling of agency where you are the one making things happen. And if you're a 12-year-old, I think you're right on the verge of having that some kind of authority, maybe in 2 years' time. But when you're 12, you're really discounted completely. It's like you're still sitting at the children's table and you don't get them invited. Whereas when you're 15, you're kind of treated as a young adult. But 12-year-olds who are smart and sharp as a tax, they're just not given that kind of respect. So when they're reading the book, they're going, yes, this is what I want to do. So hopefully not be a criminal.
That's exactly how I remember feeling at 12, is that, like you said, being sat at the kids' table and sitting there feeling like I'm too old for this. No one around me recognizes I'm too old for this except me. And Artemis as a character is he's not just not waiting in the car. He's not waiting in the car and then sort of sneaking off when the grownups aren't looking. He is actively creating chaos in a lot of ways. And he's taken his brains and taken his smarts and decided what he's going to use them for, and at least to start, what we see him using them for is sort of evil, which I found it totally different and unlike anything else I'd been reading at the time. And they're such familiar, happy comfort books to me.
You're very kind. It's lovely to talk to people who read them as a young person and to see what they thought of them. It does mean a lot to me, and I think it's hard to deal with. It's hard to. I'll keep picking up things. That's my nervous tick. Anything on my desk, I'll pick it up and wave it. It's hard to just. That's why I like going out so much, so you can sit down, and when kids come up to get the book signed, you can try and have a word with them and make it like a real personal meeting. But so when you don't have that, and the books are just that's something else we were talking about. Our books just come out now, and it's like we have these lovely talks, but in previous years you'd go tour around and you'd meet people in every store, and it would be the lump book. You'd have a big book launch in New York maybe or something, but those days are probably gone forever, or at least for the next few years, thanks to Mr. Omicron.
Well, and I think for me anyway, I get so caught up in the business of being an author and the marketing and the publicity and sort of the terrible habit now that's so easy because of social media of comparing yourself to other authors and what they're doing, and I get so caught up in almost the bureaucracy of it that then when you actually get to go out and meet readers and talk to readers, I feel like that grounds me so much and reminding me all of that stuff doesn't matter. What matters is these people and these books and these experiences we have with these stories. It's
and individual kids, and not just you're right. I would be seeing how many people would read the books, but the idea that you really should think of that one kid reading the book like you were, and like I was, and that's who you should consider. But I have given myself a lovely gift. I said it about a year ago that when the third book comes out and I've finished the publicity, I think this is the last event. I think I'm going off social media, so I will be going off all of that. I really feel it's not a place for me. It's not. I can go on Facebook. I think that's legally okay for someone in their 50s, but Instagram. I just feel Twitter and Instagram are not. I just don't feel any connection, and I'm trying to do Instagram to push the books, but it's just blatant. I'm just being blatantly hijacking a social media site to try and to plug books. So once we finish here today, Mackenzie Lee, I am gone. They'll still be up there, and maybe occasionally I'll post a picture. I was
going to say I'll miss your face there, but I understand that feeling of the screaming into the void where everyone else is also screaming. I like Instagram because I like the medium of it, and I like doing something visual. I don't do a ton of promo stuff though on there too. So much of it is just my life and my dog and stuff like that.
You have a lovely profile. Instagram is the best, I think. It because the nasty hasn't really infected Instagram yet.
Yeah, and Twitter. I got off Twitter a couple of years ago, and I every once in a while will have to look at it for some reason for whatever, and it's I break out in hives just seeing the logo. It stresses me out, and now there's TikTok, and I feel like such an old person now that I keep having my publisher say you need to to join TikTok, I'm like, I don't think I belong there. Like, I don't think people want me there. I don't have anything to say on there. And I don't think that that's not why people are going to the, I don't know. I have a complicated, like most people, I think I have a complicated relationship with social media and wish that I could do this whole business without it, but it feels so sort of.
It'd be nice. I mean, I think if Instagram was being used for what it is for, then that would be lovely. And most of the time it is. So that's why I think Instagram is nice. But I've been like abusing it to try and peddle books. So I don't think that sounds very cynical, and I'm not cynical, and people know what I'm doing. I'm not hiding, but I just would like to if I want to go on Instagram, I would just like to look at my friends going on holiday or whatever. That's kind of nice. But
well, I think then too, book world has started to exist in these two separate spheres where you have the actual real meeting people, going to events, doing events, talking to readers, and then you have this whole other world that exists on social media, and there's all different conversations happening there. And I feel like the disconnect between what happens, like it's almost like a made-up world. It's almost like a made-up, like a multiverse, like an alternate kind of timeline of, and it's the disconnect, I think, for me, because we've all been so isolated for the past couple of years, the disconnect has become so much more pronounced. And there are definitely times that I'm just like, I just want to step out of this fake social media world and wish I feel like I could, but it feels like such a part of the job now.
It is. I mean, I can't even, my son is 18, and the idea that he would not be on I'm not sure what he is on, but he would not be on that. You couldn't even suggest that. So, but I do tend to look at people on Instagram and just say, I bet he's miserable. I bet she's miserable. I bet it's, I don't believe any of it. So I'm a bit of a cynic. So it's time to, to step back. This is a great book event.
I know. I'm like, we haven't even talked about the book yet. I was looking at my questions, like, how do I funnel this back into Fowl Twins?
I'm sorry. I'm
no, it's great. I mean, this is what I always want book events to be, which is just talking with a friend. I will, to kind of funnel this back though, other than social media, how have kids' books changed, do you think, since 2000, whatever, when Artemis first came out? How have you seen the industry?
I think they become a lot more important. I think I'm not being, my books are kind of whimsical, and they might deal with stuff a little bit, but it's really it's my own personality coming through. But I think children's books are at the vanguard of representation now, inclusivity and representation, and especially writers like you. And in the last 10 years, I think it's been fabulous. And if you want to see where humanity is going to be in 10 years' time, probably look at kids' books now, because they're always first to ride that wave, or whatever needs talking about. You look to kids' books, and that's become such a big deal. And myself and my co-writer Andrew Duncan, we wrote Illegal, which is behind me there. I'm not sure there it is up on the shelf.
I don't know why I pointed. It's not.
It's about kids making a journey up from sub-Saharan Africa across the Med into Italy, often on their own. And I felt that might have been a problematic book to write 20 years ago, because it would be a downer, if you know what I mean. But now there's room for that kind of book, and I think that's such a wonderful thing, where a fantasy writer like me can also do a graphic novel like this that has meant such a lot to so many people. And what I love about co-writing stuff is that you can be proud of it, because your natural instinct when you write your own stuff is not to be proud of it and to be very critical. But when you work with someone like Giovanni and Andrew and Oliver and PJ and people like that, you can be really, and it's such an amazing, liberating feeling. I mean, I'm going around, when we toured with Illegal, there it is there, I was so happy because I was never afraid of being attacked, and I just thought it was great, and I would defend it to the ends of the earth. Where if anyone says anything to me about Artemis, chapter 2, that's not great, and the structure, I'd be like, yes, I know, I meant to change that, it's terrible. But when you co-write stuff, you can allow yourself a sense of pride. And for Irish people, we don't know how to deal with that. So it's a lovely thing. But that's how I think books have changed. And there's so much more. It used to be that it would be, what's the biggest audience? What's the biggest audience we can get? So let's eliminate anyone who's not in that audience and just do books about the captain of the football team, and and the cheerleader, and let's give them some tiny flaw, like maybe he's got a scar, or maybe he's got, like, her hair is a bit messy, but
she's
then let's
too
go.
clumsy. Like that's all the heroine's flaw is she's clumsy.
Yeah, she's clumsy, or there's just these, like, not real. There's no real problems at all, but they're just trying to make them relatable. Whereas now, the focus is much more on who needs a voice and who should have a voice, and those authors are rightfully pushed to the forefront. But not. I don't think anyone ever wrote a successful book who didn't write a good book. So, well, maybe a few people, but you know what I mean. Most books that do well are well written. So, but it's just good to see. I think really kids' books are shaping the world now, and I'm delighted to be a part of that in some small way.
Yeah, well, kids are growing up now with these stories and with these ideas of inclusion, and with themselves as the heroes of these stories. And when you grow up with that, you don't ever have to sort of relearn your own place in the world. You start from a place of assuming that you belong and you are a hero and you are a protagonist, and it's fantastic. I will say I'm desperate to co-write with someone, simply for the fact that when I get stuck, I can then just email it to somebody else and be like, your turn. This is when you take over. So.
Yeah, it's yours now. It's all yours. So, well, you should. The problem with that is it can be amazing or it can be terrible. Right. if you have to really put research into it. When I worked with Oliver, we met in New Zealand, funnily enough, backstage. And it was one of the Moth events where you had to go out and tell a story. Oh, yeah. So he went out first, and I thought, and I never met him, even though we were both Irish. He didn't know who I was. I didn't know he was. I thought, he tells a good story. And then I went out, and I think he thought the same. And then we went, because when you're down, Australia, New Zealand, they tend to send you to the same festivals, because once they have you down there. So by the end of the 5th festival, we were in Melbourne or something. And that by then we decided, so we put a lot of research in there, just to see, can you connect with the person? I don't know if that's a great literary reason to do something together, but we thought we would have a good time. But you should try that. There's so many brilliant picture book artists out there that would love to work with you. I'm sure, Mackenzie, absolutely. So give it a try.
I've had it on a very small scale, in that I did a illustrated nonfiction book for adults, but I had so little, and I think they do this on purpose sometimes, I had so little connection with the illustrator. I never spoke to her. I've still never met her. It's an odd thing, though, to now have this sort of shared project with someone that you don't know and you haven't met. But it is a book that I feel like I can brag about, because I like her art. So
yeah, exactly.
So
sorry.
We have a question from our audience, so we figure we should probably get back on track and actually start doing that. From Will. Will would like to know, what advice do you have for young people who want to become writers?
Hi, Will. Thanks for your question. People, if you ask this question, you will always hear you need to read and you need to write, and that is, I think, pretty obvious. But I would like to give you an answer, a supplemental answer, and I've always found it very valuable to me, is to try and surround yourself with interesting people. And I'm very drawn to funny people. And even when I was in school, when I was a youngster of whatever, 13 or 14, I would always be drawn to the guy or the girl in the schoolyard who was telling the story, who was up on the top of the monkey bars swinging around, and was just like an interesting person. And if that is happening every day, and say you've got someone who tells an amazing story or does an impersonation of a teacher, like, what happens to that? And the answer is, it just kind of flies off into the ether. But if there's a writer there, that can get preserved, and that's a huge source of inspiration. So the answer I would give you, that maybe you haven't heard before, because I'm sure you've heard loads of answers, is to just make friends. It's a really simple one. Just make friends. Don't lock yourself away. Make friends. Fill up that bank of inspiration that you'll be using for the rest of your life, and get out there and always have your ear open. What I love about phones now is you can record if someone tells a joke, you can record a little note to yourself. And I do this all the time, and then I email it to myself. I'm sure there's a better way to do it, but that's how I do it. So just, make friends, get out there. Don't try not to be alone. I mean, you have to be alone a lot of the time. My son said to me, Dad, I have to be alone. I'm a loner. And I said, okay, I get it. But, still, you make room in there for some interesting people.
We have another question from JT. JT would like to know, what books have inspired both of you throughout your careers?
Oh, I'll let you go. What do you think, Mackenzie? Do you have any? You don't have to say articles. We just take that as.
I was going to, because honestly, it's a real answer. No, Artemis was. I cannot overstate the influence Artemis had on me. Not necessarily as a writer, because I didn't want to be a writer when I was 12, but as a 12-year-old human being thinking about her place in the world and her place in stories, and I really do. I'm sincerely such an Artemis Fowl fan that it's still stunning to me that I'm here talking to you as a fellow author.
That you will get over that very quickly.
Some books that have inspired. I love Terry Pratchett. He's one of my favorite authors, and his books at different sections of his Discworld books at different times in my life have influenced me in very big ways, in terms of like you said about humor, but also not satire so much, but the idea of using literature to question systems of power, and especially using comedy as a way to question and challenge systems of power. And I just think he was such a brilliant writer, because he could be so funny one line and then flip it in the very next line. It just breaks your heart. And those are the authors that I've always found myself drawn to, and the books that have inspired me, I think, are always that balance of humor and then sentimentality. When I think about my favorite authors, it's people like Terry Pratchett, it's like David Nichols, David Sedaris, like people who are in equal terms, just like violently funny and then absolutely devastating on the same page.
Because when you're reading that, you think, well, there's no way he's gonna turn this around into being something heartbreaking, and then they just do, and it's amazing. Yeah. I think for me it would be my big inspiration was Douglas Adams, who wrote The Hitchhiker's Guide, and then following that, Terry Pratchett and people like Neil Gaiman as well, because when I used to read all the sci-fi and all the fantasy, and the bigger, thicker, the better, because I was in a readers gang, if you like. We were like the Sharks and the Jets of fantasy series.
Rival gang.
Yeah.
Did you terrorize like the historical fiction readers at your
library? We're like, God damn you with your factual books. Fiction's where it's at, man.
The genre bandana.
But then it was all very po-faced for me. I had this kind of impulse to giggle all the time, and that wasn't really allowed if you were reading Lord of the Rings. It wasn't really that. And but when I read Hitchhiker's Guide, it's like, oh, you can do this and be very, very funny and surreal and absurdist. It's possible, and that really charted where I went with my writing. It was to do comedy, sci-fi and comedy fantasy, and then Terry Pratchett, of course, as well. And I remember meeting Terry Pratchett at a book event in London, and he was like everything you'd expect. He had a big felt hat and a cloak, and I remember I was afraid to go to say hello, because it was my first. I think it was the first Artemis Fowl book, so it was my first time going to this big fancy affair, and I was just watching him, and then he left after his category was announced. He left. Obviously, he had to be persuaded to go in the first place, so he said, "I'm not." So I ran after him, and that's like your rookie error. And I said hello. I meant to say hello, and he said, "Oh, I heard you don't like touring." And I said, "Yeah, well, I don't really." He said, "Well, there's only 3 big fantasy authors who made it out in the 70s, and that's because we toured." And then he swept his cloak around and ducked into what I now say was a carriage, but was actually a car. a taxi, but ducked into his carriage. And his cloak actually flapped. I thought, oh my God, this is perfect. And he just drove off. I think there was 6 horses at least.
Death at the front, commanding the horses. I ran after an author, Scott Westerfeld, that before my book had even come out, my very first one, and he had been gracious enough to blurb it, and I was such a fan of his Leviathan books, and they'd been really influential in my first book in terms of introducing me to steampunk and this sort of science-based historical magical fantasy. And I was working for a publisher at the time. I was working for a little publisher out of Boston, and so I was at their booth at BEA, like working at the publisher's booth, and I had seen on his, because I'm a creep, I had seen on his social media that he was at BEA, and one of my coworkers said, like, you need to go say hi to him because he's blurbed your book and you need to go say thank you. And I was like, I'm not gonna like follow him around the show. That'd be so crazy. Like, I'm not gonna stalk him. And then I looked up, I was setting something up on the table, like this big thing of papers or flyers or something. And I looked up right as this man walked by our booth, and it was Scott. And I just blurted out, just went, Scott Westerfeld. And he turned around, and I tried to like get to him to explain who I was. I immediately knocked over the table I was standing behind, and also the papers I had been tidying just like went everywhere. And my coworker who knew what was going on, thankfully, was like, I'll clean it up, go talk to him. And it was just it was such a terrible way to start an interaction that I never recovered. And I've met him a couple times since, and every single time I just like, I'm never going to be cool around you. It's never going to happen. I ruined it the first time.
That's going to be a great movie. I'm already casting it in my mind. That's going to be Matthew McConaughey is going to play Scott. I don't know who'll play you yet, but it does sound like a great opening to a movie.
With Emma Stone, maybe, for the red
Emma Stone. Yeah, Emma Stone, and I think we could get that going between us. And
Emma and I both kind of have we got the red hair, and we got sort of she's got that low voice like I do. She made me feel much better about myself as someone who was always self-conscious about being the lowest alto in choir. Emma Stone made me feel a lot better about myself. And
she is also great at knocking things over. So it's perfect.
Perfect.
Excellent.
She and I were classic YA protagonists, and our only flaws were just slightly too clumsy.
You may have murdered someone though in the Reese, that just that will come out. That'll come out later in the story.
Okay, we have one more question from Kelly. Kelly wants to know, is there any chance Owen will revisit the Fowlverse down the road? Maybe some minor characters or new ones?
That's a great question.
The same question you were getting when Artemis Fowl series ended.
Yeah, it was a lot more aggressive. I mean, I was getting stuff like, you ruined my childhood. By finish, it was real people shouting at me. So that's a lovely question. I think so, Kelly. Maybe in 5 years, I might do that. I mean, it's such a nice place to live, mentally in that universe, and it's so benign, and it's a little bit like the A-Team, well, you probably don't remember the A-Team series, but like there was a lot of bullets, but no one got killed. And the Fowl twins are like, it's a bit like that, because the fun of it is, what in nuts way am I going to get them out of this? And I just try and think of crazy ways to get them out of trouble. But I think in 5 years, there's a lot of characters in there. One of my favorite characters is Mulch Diggums, who's kind of a flatulent dwarf. I thought he would be an excellent private investigator. So that's stuff like that could work. We'll see.
Please write an adult series of cozy mysteries featuring Mulch Diggums in like a small English town, like Murder, She Wrote, but with Mulch Diggums.
Mulch Diggums, yeah. Murder, She Wrote, but with tunnels. It could be.
Murder, She Tunnels.
So I'd never say never, definitely, but I'll definitely take a few years out to try other stuff and see what happens. I did a fantasy book called High Fire, and I really enjoyed that. And for adults, and I think I might revisit Burn in the swamps of Louisiana, in the bayou in Louisiana. So that something like that could be fun. We'll see. Adam has popped up.
Yes, thank you both so much for such a great conversation. This was a great way to spend my Saturday morning here in Denver. I always ask this last question. I know, Owen, you said you're probably going to hop off social media, but where can readers find you? I'm sure everyone here knows where to find both of you, but shout out your websites, or what's the best way to connect?
Well, I'm just owencolfer.com. I mean, the website will be kept open, and we will update that as it goes along, but it's just for a day-to-day documenting my sandwiches, that will probably stop.
And Mackenzie, where should we follow you?
I'll keep documenting my sandwiches. I'm at the Mackenzie Lee on Instagram and nowhere else. But really, that's all you need is an Instagram.
Yeah.
Perfect. And we are tatteredcover.com. Go there. I put links to both of Owen and Mackenzie's most recent books in the YouTube chat. So they're just right there for you to click. Thank you again for spending your Saturday morning and evening with us. I love international virtual events. It's so amazing. I can't believe we can do this.
I know, it's cool.
Holograms will be the next thing. So I'll be there like creepily beside you, like Emperor, whatever his name is from Star Wars.
Palpatine.
Palpatine.
I'm glad you went with a Star Wars reference. I was going to say Tupac. You and Tupac.
Or Aslan. I don't know, one of those.
Well, everyone out there, thank you for staying here. For everyone who watched live, if you're watching later, please enjoy. You could share this on Twitter, anywhere you want. Have a great day.
I won't know.
Thanks so much for having us.
Oh, thanks, Mackenzie. You're so good to do this.